Benvenuti a questo
Welcome to this meeting with Don Julián Carrón, the President of the Communion and Liberation Fraternity.
Grazie.
Thank you, Don Carrón, for being here with us tonight. Where does hope originate from? Many questions converge on this question, questions which have emerged in this dramatic period of our history. What may I hope for? What is the difference between hope and optimism? Where does the ability to hope come from? These are questions we're going to tackle in the dialogue this evening, and we will follow a track we've agreed upon. We will start with a question referring to one of your publications, which was published during the lockdown period, The Awakening of the Human. How is it possible to talk about awakening in a moment in which was full of limitations, restrictions, which forced us not to go to school, to stay home, and not to go to work? Well, good evening, everybody. This is an example of the awakening of the human beings. In such a situation, nobody would have even dreamed about organizing a meeting with the extent we are witnessing 120 squares all over the world with a creativity we would never have imagined. This is an example of the way in which, if we are open-minded enough in a period of crisis, we can see the awakening of creativity coming into life, the capability, the ability to involve people, an intensity of involvement which surprises everybody. And this is the awakening of the human beings. It is not despite the difficulties, but just because there are difficulties, difficulties force us to become creative, to look for possibilities to express resources that were hidden and that only come to light faced with a provocation. There were so many novelties. Many novelties were seen during these days of the meeting, and these novelties were born because of this provocation. Otherwise, they would have developed in many years instead of just a few months. I would like to start with the example of the meeting of this year because it already gives an answer to the question why the awakening is occurring before us. So to talk about hope, let's start with the observation of our everyday life. Almost every day or almost every hour, we state, I hope this happens, I hope that something does not happen, hopefully this action goes well. So all our life is shaped according to our gaze towards the future. Hopefully, we hope that the future will turn out to be a positive future. Hopefully, we will never experience evil. So hope is a constant of our existence. Of course it is. And this is true. If you think about the fact that Pavese stated, somebody promised something to us, so why are we waiting? Pavese's genius has always impressed me, and he managed to intercept in human structure, in his human structure and in our own human structures, the fact that waiting and hope are an integral part of our essence as humans. We wait, we hope, we wait for something. Because this is an inherent part of our being into the reality. The question is that when reality becomes tragic and terrible, well, it defies our hope. It challenges our hopes. And then trouble begins, because, as Leopardi said, if just a bad thing happens, the paradise, heaven, is lost in a second. So the question is that when reality becomes relentless, the strength of our hope is put to test. So what is the difference between hope and optimism? Well, optimism is a psychological disposition to see the positive sides of reality, which are always there. However, optimism is ephemeral. If tomorrow weather changes, a storm comes and everything is finished, because we lack the strength to resist. This is why I was impressed thinking about optimism by the sentence who Voltaire stated. He mocked optimism. When he was asked what optimism is, Candide answered, "Alas, it is the eagerness to state that everything is going fine when you are ill, when you're sick." So optimism is a sort of a surrogate of hope. The reason is simple. When we end our attempts, hope has ended as well. Hope cannot stand faced with the challenges of everyday life. This is the difference that we all see when we were put to test by the pandemic, when we were forced to stay at home and we were forced to reinvent our possibility to face life. Well, then, at that moment, if our optimism, we found out whether our optimism was durable or not, whether it was capable of facing the challenge that was ahead of us. Another experience that we have often is that when we are faced with a difficult situation, which we do not manage to solve immediately, we reach a sort of standby. So we wait for time to elapse. But if I wait, if I stand still, I'm not living. I'm just hoping, and I'm just waiting for something bad to simply go away. Is it possible to really live and to be fully aware of oneself during these moments? It all depends on our pillar. Hope needs a reason to be able to face the challenges. If when we are put to the test beyond our routine, beyond what we already know, beyond our attempts, that is the point in which we can see before our own eyes whether I have a good pillar, a strong pillar, which enables me to stand the test and to face the challenges I am confronted with. If I have no pillar, I just have to wait for the storm to pass, because I don't have anything else. Yet this is a way of standing before reality, which simply does not solve. Instead, it worsens difficulties. Let's imagine a person being forced to stay at home and only hoping and only waiting for everything to pass. Well, it was quite quite hard to wake up and stand up every day with no other hopes than that of waiting for the day to pass. It was a missing occasion because we didn't learn anything, and this attitude made the situation even more unbearable. So standing before any opportunity offered by life, whether good or bad, remaining open-minded towards what may happen, or simply being able to react in front of something which we had not foreseen. This is a challenge. We need to be open-minded. We need to be open so that we can discover ourselves as persons who are able to do something we could never have imagined. This is why I'm impressed by what Montale said. The unforeseen events are the only hope. If I am not ready to face something, well, something unpredictable may happen. Over the last few months, probably all of us have discovered something we couldn't have imagined or couldn't have predicted. Maybe we've discovered new things about other people. You talked about a pillar. What may be a good pillar for us to be able to hope even when reality does not fit into our expectations? And then we have another aspect. We should be careful not to believe in false hopes. Hopes which enable us to be ourselves, even in situations we would never have imagined. Well, each of us should look into him or herself. As soon as you perceive these changes, these provocations in your own life, what really makes you feel yourself? Because at that very moment, confronted with a provocation, you test the pathway you have covered in your own life. As Don Giussani said, when you were spared the fatigue and the hardness of living, you didn't have a chance to have your creativity and your ability to face the challenges of reality have been taken away from you. If you have been challenged and provoked in many ways, you really test your resources in difficult situations. So the other people, seeing that you're experiencing similar situations, may have different reactions. It's a totally human kind of pathway. When provocations come, they have the pathway emerge, the pathway of your life. If, for instance, if you experienced some good events over the past few months, as soon as you go back to your relationships with your friends, or when you go back to work, to your everyday life, maybe you think that you were surprised of the fact that you managed to stay in a reality with an ability you thought you didn't have. For instance, you may have been surprised about the existence of reality or the relationship with other people, or a different way to work. Those who have not had this experience, or those who have not cherished this experience, simply go back to their old ways of living and of doing things. I talked with a physician, and he stated that he was so surprised and so impressed by the fact that many of his colleagues were able to face some challenges during the pandemic. And he said, well, it was a disaster, but then after a few weeks, after the emergency ended, we didn't almost say hello to each other. How is it possible that such an intense experience leaves no traces? It depends on your own life pathway, and it depends on your conscience. If you have not cherished all these moments, as soon as the emergency is over, you go back to your old way of doing things. It is as if life passed without us being able to grow as persons, acquiring more awareness, an awareness which is enriched by what happened. We may lose our lives living, or we may gain life while we are living, not because the reality spares us difficult moments, we earn something, or we lose our life when the reality is putting us to the test. We earn something when we accept the provocation and we ourselves become the key figures of the situation. And what enables us to be the key players in this kind of situations? Well, here is the big question. Each of us needs to intercept this question in ourselves. I always make this comparison to my students, so we can understand where hope comes from. Imagine that you have a loved one who is sick, and the disease, the cure for the disease has not been found. One day, by chance, you are reading a paper or you're watching TV, for instance, you read the news that in some areas of the world, another person with the same disease has healed. Even though your loved one is still sick and has no drugs, you probably have another attitude towards this person, because hope starts to work when something happens in the present situation which raises a different approach in ourselves vis-à-vis the future. This does not happen only in this comparison related to my teaching to my students. We see this constantly in the real situations. When a person aged 50 was not waiting for anything new in his or her life, finds him or herself before another person with a sparkle in his eyes, with a vibrant life. But this person started to follow this other person and to observe his or her life in such a way that then this same way of life became his or hers. Hope stems from something happening in our lives. In the present time, when we think that the game is over and we have no more expectations, that's the moment in which hopes can be originated. In that situation, I see something which opens up my gaze, which opens up my hope, because I see there's something, not in my imagination, in real situations, I see something which may open up the future of my life to something different. This is why, as Don Giussani said, this summarizes this position. Hope is a certainty in the future, but bearing in mind a present reality. So reality does not need to change initially. Reality may stay the same, but I see people who are facing the same situation in a new way. So they give me hope. If I grow as they grow, and if I learn to live the reality as they live the reality, I start to be able to tackle the difficulties of life with a hope in my eyes. However, this present moment you're talking about is not a simple presence. It's a particular presence. It is a presence each presence can stand any challenge. When the challenge is more powerful, just think about a disease. Let's think about the last resort, death. When we are confronted, or when we are confronted with an everyday life which simply is too hard to be tolerated, but the question is, what kind of experience, what kind of event must occur right now for me to be able to stand any challenge, for me to be able to face any circumstance which may occur in my life? It is there that everybody needs to think about this. Well, I've met this kind of thing. Jesus' disciples started to perceive in their normal lives a presence. When they were in the middle of the storm, they simply did not wait for the storm to pass by giving themselves good advice. They had a presence. And with this presence, they could face the storm in a different way. If they saw this happening before the disease, before death, before difficulties, before forgiveness, before any circumstance, and then they saw it, and they saw that Jesus was crucified, and then they saw him alive again. One having this kind of presence in his case, as St. Paul said, neither death, neither life, neither angels, neither heights or depth, no other creature can separate us from the love of God, which is in Jesus. I used to say to my students, and I learned a lot from my students, they were a constant challenge to me. Do you think that your mother loves you? And the student, of course, answered, yes, of course, absolutely. Are you sure? Of course I am sure. If you're so certain about that, can you think that whatever happens in your own life, your mother may stop loving you? And the student answered, no, absolutely not. This is what I said. Why? Where was this certainty rooted? Because they could not even imagine their mom, after living with her, who could stop loving them for any reason. So each of us can think about ourselves. Therefore, the simplicity of an experience which can be had by anyone, it's the same experience the disciples had with the presence of Jesus. My mommy cannot free me from death or from disease. She can accompany me. But they, the disciples, perceived a presence. They stumbled across such an experience that they put a hope in their own history, as St. Paul said, which will never disappoint. This is St. Paul's formula, a hope which never disappoints, whatever the situation may be. And so the problem of our hope refers to our faith. Are we certain, as a child is certain about the love of his or her mom? Do we have a certainty rooted in our ego, so that whatever happens in our lives, we are certain that whatever happens, nobody can ever separate us from this presence? If there is no such presence, loving us so much that whatever I may do, whatever happens, I can still hope because of my experience, but at the end, hope is an empty word. We can say whatever we want, but at the end, if there is no historic presence, Jesus, who died and then resuscitated, that's the ultimate hope of man. Otherwise, the hope becomes something which can expire. Jesus instead put in history a fact which is the origin of our hope. This is the origin of our hope. When you meet this, as happened to a friend, Miguel Tumendi, we saw him a couple of days ago. If you find this in persons who have intercepted, for instance, listening to a journalist in the hospital, then they found diversities, they found differences, and they found another one, and they saw that all these had a different way to live, which was challenging. At a certain moment, you discover that this presence we are talking about continued to be present in history, and it challenged that person who had lost his relationship with the faith for the past 50 to 60 years. So he went back on track and he rediscovered life with all its intensity. If you see these things, you cannot but be impressed. Because today, the same history is repeating over and over again, the same history which happened 2,000 years ago. So the ability to stay inside or before any situation is the evidence that you have a hope which never disappoints. But in this way, you confirm the hope. You strengthen your hope. Absolutely.
So you face difficulties when you test your hope. Maybe this may seem abstract, something abstract, but why not? I mean, what you see, what Turmendi has seen, this person after 50 years could not but wait that life would go away. But before your life, you have people define skepticism, define the fact that we're happy with our life. I mean, what can give you hope is not something abstract, not a poetry. This is useless. And we have seen that during the coronavirus, during the fear during the coronavirus. This is not enough. You need a reality. And we are somewhat excited for that reality. It has become flesh and blood. We're not talking about abstract values. We're talking about people living this hope in a way which is challenging. So we're talking about something real, but above all, we understand that this is real for the type of subject that generates. When you meet these kind of people, if you really listen to them and you put yourself at their service like Jesus' disciples, you can generate a subject that can take on the challenges, not because they are heroes, but because they are generated from such a hope, from such a trust, that they can live as men who are self-aware, who do not withdraw from reality, but every time they face reality, this is the opportunity for them to verify the consistency of hope. To me, the lockdown was a wonderful opportunity. For me, it was like saying, okay, what I'm living, what I believe in, what I have given my hope to, can we do that? Without having hope, it will be difficult when we cannot overcome things. It will be difficult to withstand the circumstances. Therefore, Christians can play a fundamental role in society today. Many people have been surprised by the fact that we have organized the meeting this year. Many people thought that would have been impossible. But why are we holding the meeting? Because we don't surrender before difficulties, before problems. We have not given up because we were afraid of challenges. On the contrary, we were provoked by the challenges, and we said to ourselves, okay, because we hope, because we do believe in hope, for the grace that was given to us, we have to say that to everyone. Now, let's go back to what you said. Hope usually has to be put into a historical context. In public debate, we often talk about the post-World War period. At times like that, every energy spent by people can improve the people's situations, and there's continuous growth. For decades after the war, there was continuous growth supported by technological progress. So it was like hope that step by step coincided with something happening automatically. Then in 2008, 2011, there was a break. Everything stopped. There was no longer growth, continuous growth. At some point, everything stopped, and the situation started to worsen. We were not sure about our standard of living. Maybe our children would have a future that was not as bright as ours, and so everything changed. And we also had to change our way to wait for something. So either we continued to hope or we had to give up. I read an article the other day that was talking about the pandemic of suffering, talking about the last decade, with an increase in depression rates because there was a new mindset that was given up. How does this historical context affect our hope, especially at times like this, where we have the pandemic? Because we are now living, we live in a social context, we don't live isolated from others, and therefore this moment is affecting us all. I believe that these events, the economic crisis and now the pandemic, have really challenged our concept of hope and trust. So it's as if there has been a break in that trust that we had in a continuous growth, like mechanic growth in economy, in healthcare. And we have seen that these things cannot be taken for granted. I am always surprised by a sentence of Pope Benedict, who said that we believe that all progress leads to growth, but that only applies to science. When we talk about human life, a new beginning is always necessary, and we've seen that. As soon as trust is questioned, as soon as money is questioned, the family starts to save. People do not invest. People think on a short-term basis, with a short-term logic. So, you're talking about despair, and despair is always a risk because once you lose trust, it's not that you can change all of a sudden. Giving trust back once there is suspicion is something difficult. Does not happen overnight. And so you test the hope you have. So, if we don't have a pillar where our hope can rest to be reborn from the ashes, then it's a problem. That's why we can make a new start again and over again. This is what we all hope for. So, these days, we are living together a situation that can show us how it is possible to start again. In Italy and around the world, we will be able to see new forms of creativity that can challenge the difficult situation we are experiencing today. And just facing these unforeseeable events where our trust is questioned, we can really live 100%. Our ancestors were challenged much more than us with wars, with economic crises, but they were very consistent. Let's think about our children. Only if we do have hope that we can convey them, that we can convey our children, we can avoid them being fearful of life. We do have to help them through our hope. They have to become aware of all the resources and all the opportunities that they have. And this, what is at stake is the future of our children here. If they find a person who helps them take on the challenges of the future, then we will win the match. Just like our ancestors were not afraid of taking on challenges, our children will need to be able to take on their challenges, but they will need to understand reality. And we will need to give them examples showing them that it is not just possible to give up from reality, but to be creative under difficult circumstances that were not even imaginable. Now, let's continue dwelling upon this subject. This is very important. This is key for our children. Right now, how do we have to look at the future ahead? And how do we need to establish our relations with children, to manage our relations with children? There's two possible ways, I think, to manage our relations with children. There's people who tend to save other people to understand reality. I mean, by doing so, they think that their children will be spared problems, difficulties. Problems are always perceived as threats. It's as if the world was a big threat and children have to be protected against that. And therefore, this creates mistrust. On the other side, there's families, teachers who, rather than instilling fear, show children right the opposite. They don't spare children reality, but they introduce their children to reality. So step by step, whatever the difficulty might be, these people provide suggestions, provide ideas. So children that way can see people who do not surrender before difficulties. And this is absolutely necessary today, so that our children can be offered an opportunity for them not to be afraid. Especially because they see people, adults, who can look at the future without fear, who are not influenced by difficulties. So for us, this is fundamental, much more fundamental than knowledge, even to give children enthusiasm to get to know, to improve knowledge, even to give them trust through which they will be able to tap fully on their resources. When you challenge children, children give us unexpected answers, which are surprising for us. Sometimes I think if children would really realize what they're saying, how they behave, they would be surprised by that. So they have to be made aware of what they say, because this is the only way they will be able to discover the pillars to then continue their route without surrendering. And this is an educational path, I would say. Only if they can find adults to go along this way, we will be able to look at the future with hope, and they will be able to look at their own future with hope. And maybe some children may also educate us. Definitely. I really learn a lot from the youth because sometimes they are much better than us because they have no filters in their relation with reality. Sometimes they have some difficulties, but oftentimes I learned from them, but they didn't realize that they were teaching me and of the importance of the words they were saying. In order to capitalize on what you have, you need to really realize what you have. In modern times, Christianity has often been accused of taking attention away from real life, from the challenges of real life, and healing people by talking about life in another world where there's more social justice. So Christianity is the opium of peoples, taking us away from reality. Today, this is no longer the case. Christianity is no longer accused of such things. But for the people who live the Christian hope, do they not risk of losing something? As in, maybe Christians can close themselves in a context where they can live well, whereas the hope you have described is a hope leading to engagement, risk, in creating reality. Where is the difference between these two types of hope? In the type of Christianity that you experience. There's a type of Christianity which cannot awaken man. So it thinks about another world because it is afraid of this world. And then there's a Christianity which awakens mankind, awakens man, its creativity, its intelligence, its freedom. And because of that, that man really wants to work hard and wants to experience this reality. And this is the opposite of what Christianity has done. The point is that sometimes we may run this risk. But this is a way of living faith which is different from what used to be in the past. Everyone was surprised by a person who didn't give up, who lived in the present reality. Jesus was so much engaged in every meeting he had, in every situation he was involved, in any challenge, every challenge he was launched, that he was a presence that could but surprise people. This is Christianity. And if it's not like this, then this is not Christianity. And this is what the gospel is teaching us. The Christian is the person who starts, experiences reality at present. It can experience the ability to love, to do anything, to walk among difficulties, to overcome any defeat that other people cannot do. So, I don't know what types of Christians those accusing Christianity of that have found. But we have to bear witness of that. We have to bear witness of the fact that Christianity is not just a superstructure coming from outside, but is something saving and making man, creating man as a whole, and giving him a home, giving him hope. Then Christianity wouldn't be interesting. Whereas Christianity awakening the man, making man work hard, making man look forward to be involved, because life is beautiful when you do something good for others, when you do other people's good, when you work for others, then and only then you can understand the contribution that each and every one of us can give. Christianity gives us a certainty, enabling us to look at the future without giving up reality, but enabling us to tackle any challenging future. In the end, let's go back to the first question. Where does this hope come from? Is it something that we can do on our own, or is that a gift that is given to us? It is a gift that is given to us. It is something unexpected. It is a gift. But it's a gift that can be found by meeting someone. It is not a gift coming from nowhere, coming from the sky. It is a gift that you can see, like Turmendim, who listened to the radio and listened to a journalist who was speaking differently, or a student listening to a professor and getting involved with this professor, or a person who's sick and sees a doctor who gets really involved with the patient, or a professor who is passionate about his job. This is evidence of something that has happened in life, and that whatever happens, these people can generate something good and hope for us, if we are ready to be involved and to be fascinated by that hope. We are created to be fulfilled. So, the more you find something that awakens you, whatever happens, that man is a man who is erect, that stands before the difficulties of life. I believe that tonight we have given a gift which has strengthened our hope at these dramatic times. And without this hope, this moment, this period would risk becoming tragic. But with this hope given to us by Julián tonight, we have understood that we can exploit these opportunities that have been accelerated by the pandemic. Thank you very much to Father Julián Carrón.
Sembra che sia andato veramente bene. Sì, sì.